Welcome back to the Paperstac podcast. My name is Rick Allen, and this is
Kevin Shortle.
Kevin Shortle. Not Brett Berkey today. Brett Berkey's behind the scenes. We got somebody live in the office, Kevin Shortle, for the ever so popular My First Note purchase. I got to tell you, I pretty much learned this business from this gentleman sitting right here. He taught me most of everything I know right now, and it's going to be really hard for me not to go into the stories of Kevin's past. I would say one of the most interesting men in the note industry today. So, Kevin, man, welcome.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, it's good.
Enjoy coming to the office. Great to see you guys, and easier location for me to get to.
It is. It's
right down the road. So now that I know where you are, be careful. I might just be popping in here.
How long did it take you to get here?
Keep you guys on track. It's 3.7 miles.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
you walked here in
right
about 15 minutes.
Known for being a quick walker, but that's referencing.
Kevin's the fastest. We went to Puerto Rico one time in Old San Juan, and I was trying to keep up with Kevin walking around Old San Juan, and if we were turning laps, he would have lapped me like 3 times. The guy's hard to catch up with. So tell us about the note industry. You've been in it for forever. When did you start in it?
I've been married 32 years, and I got started in it right around the time we got married. So somewhere in that 32 year range is when we got started in it. And it was a completely different business as far as how everybody approached it.
The 80s.
Yeah, late 80s, and
that's amazing.
The approach was, we didn't have the technology. I mean, there was no such thing as Paperstac. There was no such thing. I'd have to go to the courthouse to try to find it.
How did you, where did you start? Before notes, where were you?
Before notes, I always wanted to get into real estate. So as soon as I graduated college, I moved to Orlando, and I became a commercial real estate appraiser.
Okay.
And I did that for about a year and a half, and I was like, you know what, the big money is selling real estate.
Yeah,
so I'm going to go sell real estate, and then I'll be driving the big car. I still have my '68 Mustang, from college. I'm like, well, I got to get the Honda Accord, the 4-door, all that sort of stuff. And I remember at the interview, they were like, well, we're looking at your resume. You bartended, because I bartended stuff all through college and everything else. And they said, you can't do that at night, when you're selling real estate. I'm like, okay. And they said, because we don't want you, trying to sell somebody's house and then they go to dinner that night and you're serving drinks, I said, yeah. I get that. So, of course, I bartended way across town because I had to eat, stayed out of my area.
You're right.
And gave myself a year in that, and it's tough, it's just really tough. And the one thing I got out of it was the first piece of real estate that I bought. We used to have back then assumable non-qualifying loans. And A&Q, assumable non-qualifying. You basically just signed a document and now you're responsible to make the payments. I mean, that was it. So this guy comes in, and I was working the desk Saturday, Sunday, at the real estate office, a low man on the totem pole. And this guy comes in, he goes, I just, want somebody to take over the thing. And I'm like, well, I'll buy it. So that's how I got into my first deal, 2-bedroom, 2.5-bath townhouse. And the other thing I got out of that, it's funny how paths lead, into something down the road. I knew more about real estate and valuing real estate than anybody in that real estate office. It was an old Higgins and Heath ERA. Mm-hmm. Remember Electronic Realty Associates?
Yes.
Way back. So they became Better Homes and Garden, I think. But with ERA, they at least recognized it, said, God, you know a lot about real estate, but I'm not making any money. I'm not selling anything. I'm not listing anything. And, of course, being young and everything else. But he asked me if once a month I would teach the group how to evaluate real estate and how to go into some, other things about real estate. And that's how I really started speaking in front of a group as well.
How did you know so much about evaluating real estate?
Well, that first year and a half as a commercial real estate appraiser, I was the guy that did all the work.
The grunt work.
Yeah, and then and again, it was going to the courthouse. It wasn't internet. It wasn't sitting on my computer. It was going to the courthouse, going through big books,
Book and
the
plat.
multiple listing service. MLS was on a book.
I remember.
We didn't have MLS
on
the computer.
That.
So no cell phones, none of that. So I would just spend my days in the bowels of the courthouse just going through stuff, getting documents, and that sort of thing. So you really, really, really had to learn the business. And with that, again, I just carried a lot of knowledge with because I enjoyed it. And, I like teaching the stuff, and it just led into me speaking and doing some gigs like that. So I think that kind of put me on that path of training as well.
So you went down. So you started real estate, and then what caused the first note? Was that it? Was that like you'd say, oh, I assume that note?
No, notes I hadn't even heard of yet. So notes, it was all about buying real estate and that sort of thing. And I started working for a company. I'm trying to put the time frames. My wife is so good at this. But what I ended up doing, I was working for this company, got in their real estate division, and we were teaching people how to invest in real estate. And then I met a guy who just made $15,000. Again, you got to think of the time frame here where we're talking about. And
15 grand.
It was a lot of money. It's still a lot of money today, but I mean, it was a lot. And I'm like, wow. And I said, well, how did you do that? And he told me about what he was doing, wholesaling real estate notes.
Okay.
And I'd never heard of that. Like most people, when they run into this business, I never even knew it existed. And so that was for me. I'm like, wow, well, that's interesting. You never saw the house and you never met the people. And nope, just put this together with this buyer and made that. I'm like, wow, well, that's different. So maybe I want to start pursuing that. So I hooked up with him, and I was kind of the marketing creative guy. And, you look at businesses and you go, well, how do we scale this? If this can be done, if there's just two of our efforts, me and this other guy, we're doing this business, we're going to be limited. Right. So I said, all right, how do we scale this up? So I said, well, I'll write a program and I'll teach people how to do this. We'll provide them with leads, because at that point there was finally a lead generation company that would do a printout of leads, so you didn't have to go to the courthouse anymore to find the leads. So that all.
How nice was that?
So, oh yeah, it was a game changer, because that allowed me to scale it. So we sold this little program that I wrote, the Hidden Cash Flow System. It was on 6 cassette tapes in a 3-ring binder. and as we sold those, and I had this other company I was working for, they bought not the rights to it, but they paid me a royalty when it went out there and sold. So all of a sudden across the nation, we started building up this network. And we'd supply them with the leads. And what they would do is go out and find the people who own notes. They would fill out a form, they'd get it back to us, and then we'd get the note sold. And that's how we made our money. So it wasn't, when I first started, it wasn't about buying a note with your own money. It was essentially, how do we build a business where we can just get all these notes?
How much volume can I turn? How can I just
turn around
bring it
and let somebody else buy it? And we'll just make a fee.
Buy it at 10 and sell it at 12.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you didn't know so much as go and buy your first note. You jumped in and just started turning and burning notes.
Exactly. So I was waiting, where were you going to get to that question of what was your first note? I honestly don't remember, because it didn't have that impact of, wow, this is my first investment. It was basically someone came in with a lead, we looked at it, gave a quote, he came back with a quote, and then I handed it off to my partner, he gets it funded, and I'm off to the next thing. But I'll tell you what note did. The first note that really stood out to me and impacted me quite a bit, I think, is an interesting story. And I remember this person to this day. So it wasn't my note, but it proved to me that if you taught someone correctly, if you guided them in this business, virtually, anybody can do this. And this one really stood out to me. And again, this goes back 20-something years. I remember her to this day. Is out of Lubbock, Texas. Her name is Carol Bakus. That's how much of an impact it had 20-something years ago. So I'm starting to train people now. And she comes up to me at an event, little Carol. She's in her mid-60s, and she's a little tiny, really shy. Comes up, and she's about to invest $600-700. And she goes, Kevin, I just need to hear from you personally, face-to-face, that I can do this business. And I said, well, Carol, I've worked with so many people and, all different backgrounds and this and that. She goes, yeah, but I need to know that I can do it. And I said, well, tell me about yourself. So she'd been married her whole life, didn't know really anything about money, financial management, let alone real estate or notes. That just wasn't in her thing. She goes, I leave my house to go to church. I go to the grocery store, and that's basically it. And I was like, well, Carol, this is still, which it is today, this is a people business. The product is notes. The product is real estate backed notes, but it's still a people
But if you can't talk to
business,
people, it's not going to work.
Of course. It's a whole part of it. So I said, Carol, you're going to have to break out of that shell, And I came real close to telling her, Carol, this isn't for you. Don't do it. Part of my brain was just like, don't get her involved in this, because she's not going to be able to do it. And thank goodness I didn't do that, because she went on. Her goal was to get her grandkids into jobs. They were going to college and all. She wanted to pay for their college and everything and get them going, and which was expensive and everything else. And gosh, her first deal, it was one of these deals where it was on, it was off, it was on, it was off.
Mm-hmm.
You would, when you all start doing your due diligence, everybody listening to this probably has done this, but it's levels, right? You think you know everything about the note, and then something else comes up, and this comes up, or this document's missing, or whatever it is. This deal was on, it was off, and I said, Carol, because I really wanted her to succeed, and I said, Carol, you got to walk away from this one. You're spending all this time on one deal. You got to look at multiple deals. And she ended up, it finally came back to us, and it closed. It was like 6 months from the whole start to finish, like 6 months, which is way too long. But again, she ended up making maybe $1,000. I can't remember the exact amount, which is essentially nothing over 6 months. But for her, she took a copy of that check. She put it up on her wall. She was so proud of that. And I invited her to come back, because after that, that's all it took. That was the catalyst for her. And she became a different person. She stood up straight now, because she was always kind of rounded and shy, would look at somebody straight in the face. She would also, stand tall. She would get in front of an audience, which she never would do. And she ended up doing stuff all over the country. Her grandkids, both of them went through college.
Okay.
They ended up working for her instead of getting jobs out of college. And it just impacted me so much, because I'm like, man, if I was that close to talking her out of this.
But you helped her.
Of course.
Yeah.
That was the thing. It's like, no, you can do it, and I'll work with you, and we'll make it happen. And every deal, and I think this is still true today, every deal you do, you get paid in money and knowledge. And you've seen where sometimes people just stumble into, this note business is easy. I just found a note and I bought it.
Yeah.
And they get lucky, and sure, it's great. So they made money, but they got zero knowledge. But I promise you that will equal.
Oh my gosh!
Long enough, it'll equal out.
If you get 5, that happened to us, man. We got 5 easy ones, kind of off the rip.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, the first one, it was just like, oh my gosh, this is like taking candy from a baby. Yeah. And then you look back and you're like it's like Indiana Jones when he has to step on the things not for the floor to fall out. I just happened to hit the right steps and didn't blow my legs off.
Right.
Boy, but did I learn some knowledge. I didn't make some money on some few, and boy, did I get some knowledge.
Yeah, so same thing for her. She made a little money in the first deal, but a lot of knowledge, a lot of confidence, and then just took it from there. So for me, that's my first big deal that I really, really remember and had an impact, just on so many different levels.
So you bought a lot of stuff. I guess how did you get into teaching? We're gonna deviate a little bit from typical, because you did so much. You did such high volume. It seems like the teaching started before the volume started, or did it kind of start walking hand in hand?
Well, yeah, because there's only so much you could do when there was just two of us.
Right.
We're trying to find leads. We're trying to do these deals, and it took a lot of time, because, again, we had to go to the courthouse and do some research and that sort of thing before the lead list came along. So once that was there, I said, well, if we can do it, again, now just imagine you got 200 people across the country, you're providing leads with that they're following up with.
And is this your first teaching thing? Is this
exactly.
This is the first, like I know you taught at the real estate ERA, but this is your first, okay, I'm going to put together a course.
Yeah, this is a course. First time I wrote a course, put it together, recorded it, and then sold it. Yeah, it was the first time. And
is this...
What's that?
Did this lead to further teaching?
Oh, yeah, because then then you can kind of see, well, I have a talent for it. I enjoy doing it, and I know the topic well. And I'm telling you, there's something also about when you teach something, you learn more.
You learn it 3 times better, I heard.
Right?
So there's some metric there.
Yeah, there's definitely a dynamic with that. And I look at Paperstac every day. I look at notes every single day, and I spend hours at a time looking. And when you do that, you just see so many things and pulls up. But it led me a long time to get down, to that path where I'm working with people personally now, one-on-one, because it's always been through courses, and then from courses you start to do some consulting, and it starts to grow from there. And then, of course, you've heard me talk about the stories of being on TV and
But, I mean,
I don't know which direction I should go.
Oh, my favorite stories. You were on Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous?
I was with Robin Leach.
Robin
I wasn't
Leach.
that show, but Robin was from Lifestyles of Rich and Famous.
And you're on a show
YouTube
with
and
him.
everybody, you'll find Robin Leach back in the early 90s, I guess we're at now, time frame wise.
I'd like to introduce you to a very good friend of mine. He's an entrepreneur, a successful business executive, and an educator who has taught probably thousands of people to make all that money that we've been hearing about. His name is Kevin Shortle.
What does global investors do for people that really helps them avoid this problem?
10 years ago, Kevin Shortle began appearing on television news programs. Since that time, he's appeared on numerous commercials and television programs for his own companies and as professional talent for other companies.
I established goals, I set a plan, and most important, I took action.
I mean, literally the stories that I've heard and talked to you with hours and hours of stories that I almost would have a separate show to have you back on just so we could just get some bourbon or some Heinekens or something and sit back and just tell stories for a while. We won't do that on this one, but so that led to teach. So okay,
then it was on a mass scale. So it went from something very small to something that went. I was on our shows ran on ABC, NBC, CBS. I mean, it was nationwide. It was.
And
all over.
are you doing at this time? Are you still doing the notes? Are you still getting the notes and wholesaling?
So, yeah, it was all through. Well, no, the program had changed at that point where the wholesale side of the business dried up a little bit at one point. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you'd have to really understand the history of this business. The first notes that became massive in the United States were the notes where interest rates were, everybody thinks interest rates are high now. You're talking 18, 19%. Yeah. So a lot of people back, Carter administration would sell the house with financing. So there were a lot of people that created notes that didn't necessarily want to, but people weren't buying houses at 18%, but they would at 9%. So a lot of seller finance notes were written at 8, 9%. And that's right. It was half of what the rate was at the time. So we would find those individuals and see if they would rather have cash now versus the monthly payment.
Sure.
Now, a lot of them didn't even know you could sell a note, that sort of thing. Again, so
that
different.
That happens so much. People, they own these notes and they're like, I didn't know I could even sell these.
Right. And how do I do that? And who does? It grew, it grew from there. But when that inventory kind of dried up, and that's what everybody's doing. That's where big buyers, Metropolitan and FNAC is still around, but Associates, there are these big buyers in the industry that basically everybody went to bring their deals through. So they were the bigger buyers. And it was probably an easier move at that point in time to make just revenue with the wholesaling of it. But when that inventory started to dry up, then the industry made a change. Metropolitan, which was one of the biggest buyers out of Spokane, Washington, and we know people who worked for that company. The old man who owned it, he passed away, and the family didn't want to take on, so a huge buyer was gone. Eventually, Associates went away. A couple other places, smaller ones in D.C. So the pool of all of a sudden those big buyers aren't there anymore. Kind of dried up, and then it became, well, you have to adjust to the marketplace, and that's the whole thing. And we're doing that today. The last crash in 2000, that was an adjustment to the marketplace. We saw inventories just explode in a different realm. We're anticipating change in inventory coming up, right now. So back then it was a shift, and it became, all right, now you start to buy, your own assets and build them up that way.
And you went from doing, I don't know, you just started out. How many deals were you moving a month at your peak?
Oh boy, I wish I had an answer for you. I just don't remember that much, but it's for some reason probably 20, 30, something like that.
20
at
or
some
30
point.
Deals a month. Wow, that's some serious. I mean, you're talking 300-400 a year, just depending on.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a lot of inventory.
Yeah. And
that's dealing with big buyers, huge buyers,
right?
Like institutional guys.
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, I think FNAC is still, they've been around 40 years, and they're still buying, $3-9 million worth per month.
It's crazy they buy that stuff, and people are like, "How they get?" It's like, well, I think that at one time I heard they had money directly from
other bank.
Yeah.
So Fred Foote and his brother started that years ago. I think one of the brothers is still around, but they're still in the business, but they're backed by a bank. So their funds virtually are unlimited.
There's no bottom there.
Right.
They just got to adjust how they buy.
Right.
Well, that's good stuff.
Yeah,
man.
so it's a completely different model than which we see a lot of today, that people have a fund, that they raise capital and buy. So different rules, regulations, and approaches to all of that.
That's good. So the teaching, you started selling volume, then you're in the teaching, and you're on TV, and now you're still teaching. You got you're just but on not the mass stuff now. Now you take in students who are really looking to take on a mentor, somebody who's ready to...
I made a major shift, and I kind of had a chance to look at the overall industry, where we were, what's going on out there, and I just saw a lack of true mentorship. There's a lot of group coach, there's a lot of courses, there's a lot of that sort of stuff, but I just had a feeling that what people really need, and I got feedback from so many people, because over the years I probably trained more than anybody through the courses and the companies that I was working with, and I just said, the feedback I'm getting is people just need more handholding, they need more help, they need more guidance, because again, you can talk about all the fancy stuff we can do in the industry, but then them trying to apply that is just a whole different thing. There's moving parts, and it's new to people and everything else. So with technology and legislation changes that happened after the last crash, it just shifted this marketplace into a whole different realm. I mean, we never used to have inventory the way we do year round now. We never had that. It definitely came in cycles and in waves. We have that because of legislation. We have a more liquid marketplace. You guys identified a niche. You saw that there was nothing like Paperstac and created it. I mean, that gave a place where people could actively trade. So when you have the liquidity in a marketplace, when you have legislation working in your favor, changing banking laws, and you've got the technology like Zoom, now I can get on Zoom with everybody and just work direct, share screens, go through the deals, look at the documents, review everything, run through the calculators, look on public records, look at the contracts. I mean, just go through everything. That to me was a big game changer, and it's been for my clients as well. Because there's nothing else like it, just handing somebody a book and tape, those days were gone. Having online video courses are nice, but the business becomes real when all of a sudden you're actually doing a note deal, not reviewing a course on it, and you're like, did I do that the right way? Is that right? Did I miss this? Did I sign that document the right way?
Paralysis by analysis.
No, it's a whole different thing. And for some people, it's just to have the confidence where someone like myself is like, yeah, you're good. This is going to be fine. You're good deal. Go for it. And so it's been great. And I really have enjoyed this part of it, because for so many years it was just teach somebody and hope they do well, and I'm out on the road and teaching courses again, and I don't really know the results. Now I know very well what we're doing and how people are doing. So it's been exciting movement for me to go to that format.
That's good. Hardest step, going from 0 to 1 notes or 1 to 10 notes for people?
I'd probably say 1 to 10. What inevitably happens in this industry is you typically run out of your own capital. Everybody starts to face that at some point in time. And when you run out of your own capital, then you've got to think, well, what do I do from here? Some people went on and built funds, raised capital that way. Some people just did smaller partnerships, where they might just partner with maybe starting with a relative and then graduating to maybe finding some investment club where they can start to do some deals that way. Or they just simply learn some techniques like partials and structuring deals where they just bring a deal to another investor, and that investor pays the money. So that's really, I think, going from that, say, 1 to 10. And I know that's kind of arbitrary. It could be 10 to 20 or whatever it is.
Whatever it is.
It's at some point, when your capital gets exhausted, you've got to get creative. But that's why I tell everybody, look, the biggest thing in this industry, like most things, I think, is the ability to identify a deal. So if you know how to look at a deal look at a note and identify that that is a good deal for somebody, and you're able, I think, to explain that to somebody, lay it out in a fashion where they can understand it, then the opportunities just are constantly there.
They're there,
Yeah.
and you can find the funding. The funding, I would imagine, is there if you've done a couple deals and you can identify it. And if you've got I don't know if you've done this, but I would imagine having somebody like a Kevin Shortle in your corner when you're going to talk to capital, you say, look, this is the deal. I've looked over it. I've looked over my mentor. He's been in the business for 30 years. Yeah. I imagine that helps. So when you're working with your clients,
students,
your friends, are you teaching them? Are you talking about, hey, okay, there's a goal to let's buy that first note, but then we got to look at, hey, let's look at partials or hypothecation and stuff like that. Let's set up this plan for, what's your goal? Are you looking for just one or two, or are you looking to make a business?
Yeah, so my approach is it's education and consulting, and the consulting really is the true mentorship. It's right. Me working directly with you, one-on-one. But you have to have the education there because I think you have to be well-rounded. There were some other people in the industry, and they still do it today, where they only teach like one side, let's say performing notes or just non-performing notes or one technique, which might get somebody going, but what are you going to do when that technique isn't there anymore or it doesn't work anymore? Or
what happens when you're learned performing and it turns non-performing?
So I think everybody should be well-rounded and get the complete training. So that's part one for me. And I do like the fact that all my training now, instead of live, and you've been to my live events, as you were saying, sure. And you're filling out yellow pads, as you're going through and taking notes like crazy. There is a comfort in being able to have those on videos where they're broken up into pieces like I have, and where you can stop, start, go back, replay, or even go,
sure.
I know we talked about that technique, I wonder what that was, and go in your video archive and go, oh, there it is, that's how we do it, and that's how the calculator works, and that's, all of that sort of stuff.
For us, when we went to your live, the 3-day live you were teaching, I think we were in a different sort of place than most people that walk in, because we owned 15 notes and I had a couple $1 million liquid waiting to buy more, right. And so sort of there's you don't know what you don't know, but when you've been in it for at that point 12 months, there's a fire hose of information, and I was like, oh my gosh, and I was like trying to catch it all, and at the end of it I was just like, my head was just exploding. I was like, there is so much here. And at that point, I was like, it doesn't matter what the mentorship costs. We have to do it. Yeah. And I remember leaving the live event. We drove back, and on the ride back, we learned something that we learned in the live event, which is, you'll learn some stuff there, but you're really, like you said, the meat and potatoes is when you can get into the videos, you can digest it. I can pick up the phone and call you. Man, we learned something in that live event. We made money. We made half of what we paid for on the ride back. And I was like, oh, this is it. So I think this is a loaded question. I think I know the answer. I know what my answer is. But if you have one piece of advice for somebody getting into the business, what is it?
Understand that you're getting into a business that's not perfect, number one. Okay. And you become a problem solver in that imperfection. And that's really the key to this whole thing. If you come into this expecting everything to go perfectly, you're setting yourself up for a rough ride. Now, again, you may have a deal that goes perfectly, but I'm just telling you, as it starts to play out, there's going to be but it's the same way in rehabbing a house. If you think you're going to buy a house that needs rehab and it's going to work, it's going to come out on time, perfect, at the cost that you estimated, you're in for a rough ride because it doesn't quite work that way. So you have to have a good knowledge base of the industry, expect to be able to move on your feet a little bit. What I mean by that is adapt to what comes at you, if the document's missing or this is wrong or that's wrong, how can we fix that, and not go into panic mode. I think that's really the key to the whole thing. Because again, if I've said this on camera before, everybody on my hats here, they think it has something to do with Notre Dame or Tony Robbins and all. It doesn't. I like the brand, basically, is what it is. But I like this statement too, and I've said this on some of my tip of the days and stuff. But the brand's called Live Lucky, and I think the definition of luck is the intersection of opportunity and preparedness. Yep. And when you're prepared, guess what? You see opportunity everywhere.
That's right.
So that's probably where I'd come back and say, just be a good Boy Scout, right? Be prepared. Wasn't that the first?
I had it as ownership and it was opportunity and preparedness holding hands. Yeah. Is what it is. Yeah, but I like it. It's that intersection.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. And then all of a sudden, you feel like you're getting lucky, but no, you're just prepared.
No, that's it.
That's the big thing.
That was, my answer to the question is when somebody's getting into the business, every time somebody's new to get in here I'm like, look, you need to get education.
Yeah.
Before you do anything, educate yourself. Yeah. Find somebody to listen to. Yeah. Find somebody to snuggle up with, talk to. There's plenty of free stuff to start with, but ultimately you want to get somebody who's been in the business to teach you what's going on. But I do love that answer. It's not a perfect business. Yeah. There's rocky roads ahead. Yeah. No matter what the mirage looks like.
But if you're prepared, and that's why I went to unlimited consult. So when people are in my program, they can book as many appointments with me as they want to. And because sometimes you need it, sometimes like, oh, something changed, I need to talk with somebody, and it just enables you to go forward. So the education and preparedness, you'll see plenty, and that's a good thing, plenty of opportunity in this industry. And the way the legislation is today, Dodd-Frank and everything else, those laws aren't going to change. And we're going to be good if the economy stays the same. We're going to have year-round inventory, which we've had now for a long time. But if it gets worse, we're in an industry where it actually gets better for us.
It does. It does. And I think, you talked a little bit earlier about problem solving. Mm-hmm. I think identifying problems is a good thing, but knowing that, hey, I know I'm going to be able to solve this problem. There's 3 or 4 solutions to that problem. I think my experience has been that people who are the best problem solvers and the most creative, because you're right, it's not a perfect business. You can look at a deal and say, I see 2 or 3 problems with this, but I've got 2 or 3 solutions for each of those problems. I'm going to move forward. And a lot of times those are the deals for me that always turn into just home run deals, knocked out of the park because everybody else looked at them and
said, not a good deal.
They said, that's not a good deal.
Yep.
The seller is then going, I need to get rid of this deal. And you're like, I'll take it on. I need it for this price.
Yep.
And then next thing you know, you're like, you solve those problems and you solve them very quickly. And
yeah.
You're like, hey, this is a
great
no-brainer.
Example. A couple months back was a deal on Paperstac, and the problem was it was really tough. It was one of those neighborhoods where you just couldn't get a clear valuation of the collateral. Mm-hmm. The range was, it would come back, well, it's worth somewhere between $20,000 and $70,000. It's like, what? $50,000 swing? It's like, wait a minute. So it's just it was really hard to judge that. And of course, one of the things we always look at is, well, what's our risk? If you don't know what the underlying collateral is worth, then it makes it really, really difficult. So I'm sure a lot of people passed on that deal. So I told my client, Alvin, you guys know Alvin, I said, Alvin, offer this guy a partial with a right to buy the back end. There's your solution. The problem he has is he's going to have trouble selling this note because people are going to run into the same issue. The house, we don't know what it's worth. But other than that, pretty good looking note. Offer him some money now with the ability to get, on your option, some money in the future on that. And he did. The guy accepted the offer, went through. It's paying great.
Yeah, that's it, right?
It's like,
just, hey, you just mitigated your risk.
Exactly.
Say, it's paying, I'm mitigating my risk. If it goes bad, he's gonna step in, or at least I'm not out that much. That's fantastic. So where can people get a hold of Kevin Shortle? They want to talk to you, they want to sign up.
Sure. Of course, I've got a podcast too. You can look that up. Yes. Real Estate Without Renters. My book's out there, Real Estate Without Renters. You can get on Amazon. And the website is Real Estate Without Renters.
I love consistency. There's a branding going on there.
So, I think KevinShortle.com takes you to the same place. But RealEstateWithoutRenters.com. And I do these little tip of the days, and you guys comment every once in a while on those as I'm walking around town. So YouTube channel and Facebook and all that stuff, you can find me there too. But if you're looking for true mentorship, it's the program I put together has just been fantastic. I'm really loving it. It's been great. Clients are all happy and doing really well. So can't be any better than that.
Good stuff. So Real Estate Without Renters, Kevin Shortle, wealth of knowledge, just knows the industry inside and out, and you meet some people who teach, and you're like, they're okay, but you really know how to teach and connect and explain stuff. So I'm bragging a little bit because I went to him. I know the proof's in the pudding. I've tasted it. I've sampled the goods. Go for it. Other than that, I appreciate you coming out.
Oh, yeah, it's a pleasure.
Yeah. Paperstac Podcast coming back to you again. Kevin Shortle, thank you for joining us. We'll catch you on the next episode.